Today I would like to do a demonstration to make the point that if you can see in advance the stage of your painting at which you have to begin to be careful, it frees you to be carefree with all the other parts of it. And if you're a watercolor painter, this is particularly important because the fluidity and transparency of the paint, which is what provides the beauty of the paint, is really only there when your brushwork is not constrained by your concern about accuracy. So what we're going to be doing today is looking at another image in terms of both form and content to see at what stage of the painting process does the form bring meaning to the content. Here's a scene from Oaxaca, an alleyway, and I picked this one to make my point today because of the high contrast. Dark darks, light lights, and I think we'll see that the darks are doing most of the work of describing the content in this picture. So if I think about it in terms of layers, ideally I'd like to peel back the darks if I could only do that. You know, the way biology textbooks have those plastic overlays and you peel back the skin and you can see the digestive system inside. So I'd like to peel back the darks and the middle values and just see what's lying underneath them. What would the first layer of the light colors look like? Because I'm pretty sure that by themselves they don't tell much of what's going on in this picture. But it's when the darks go on that the scene begins to come together and make sense. If that's true, what that means for the painter is that when you're putting on the first layer, and maybe the first two layers, you can be carefree. You can put the paint on so it's really fluid and fresh without a whole lot of regard for getting it in exactly the right places. And it's not until you're doing the final layer of the darkest darks that you have to take care to, or some care, to get everything in the right place. Okay, I'm going to start with just painting the darks, the pattern of darks, ignoring everything else in the picture, because I want to find out if the, as I suspect, if the darks are really doing most of the work here. So I'm going to make a pattern of the darkest strokes. And I see that the underneath of all of that bougainvillea is really dark in here. And it stretches magically across the street. And then down the road there's a couple of doors and windows. Then this whole big shadow on the road, which is probably my favorite part of the scene. That little bit of angle it's got on it. And some stuff. I don't have to be real specific about that because even there I think I can give the paint some room to do its own thing. So there's a shadow under the car that goes up the side of the wall a little bit. Wheels, window, window. It's kind of amazing how little it takes for a car to be there. Now in this case, for the purposes of the demonstration, remember that I made all the darks the same color. In a proper painting, I wouldn't do that. Because given how potent they are and how much of the work I'm counting on them to do, it would be kind of wasteful. Anyway, I would not, in a proper painting, miss the opportunity to have color identity in the darks too. But in this case, it's only the darkness of them that we need to know about. So, a couple of wires to get the feeling of the space that gets connected. And it is pretty clear that just the darks alone begin to tell this story in a way that the lights probably won't. Now I want to paint the first layer very loosely. So I got my big brush and I'm going to block in the forms very freely. And I'm going to go way outside the lines here and let things run together without a lot of regard for anything other than making pretty paint here. So I've got big fluid washes and I can just run this stuff. Actually, I'm going to go way. I'm just going to make a mess here on purpose. That's how much faith I have in the darks to pull the whole thing together. The only thing I want to be sure of is that the paint gets room to flow around and do its own thing. And if I'm wrong, then the darks won't pull it back together, and we'll all be witness to that. Okay, that'll do. You know, all that talk about peeling back the layers like a biology textbook brought to mind that I could actually make a transparency of the darks and slap it on top of this mess that I made when I did the first layer. So I manipulated the photograph to give it super high contrast, so the darks were isolated, kind of like I did when I painted that version of just the darks. And then I printed that on a transparency, which I've got here. So we're at the moment of truth when I can put this on top of my first layer, and we'll find out whether it comes together or not. I think if I peel this off again, and we look at this and say, what is it? It's just paint on paper, and there is no illusion. No space, no light, no substance. If we look at the dark by itself, we can begin to understand certainly the space and the light, maybe not so much the substance. But when I put them together, the illusion is complete. And as I suspected before, it's the darks that did the work. Those seemingly random marks from the first layer all of a sudden become quite meaningful when they're in the context that the darks provide. And the illusion is pretty effective, even being as sloppy as I was in the first case. If it still hasn't gotten across, let me do this. I'll flip this upside down, and then I'll put this on the darks on top of it. And we'll see if we can still read the subject matter. Only now it's sunset because the colors are flipped. Seeing that in advance made it possible for me to be really carefree. Maybe a little more than I would have been if I were making a proper painting, but it illustrates the point pretty well. This exercise and a few others like it are on my blog, along with all the homework assignments I've given my classes for the past several years. And you can scroll through there and do the homework.